recall last summer you gave John the charge to look at our boundaries at our elementary schools to balance the load of them, and John gave me that charge. So we put out the call for applications for volunteers to be on the Boundary Review Committee. And we got 17 applicants and accepted them all. So we had 17 citizens on the committee, plus we also had 10 principals and 2 other school staff members. So I'd like to thank the 17 volunteers who came forth and met 5 times beginning in October through March. We had 1 meeting canceled because of a blizzard, 2 community forums, and a final work product, which you'll see tonight. Again, I'd like to thank the committee. There is a thank you card and a little token of our appreciation in a basket on your way out the door tonight after you leave. I'd also like to thank Jim Dugan, because he really made this work very, very easy for me, which I appreciate. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Jim from Parametrics. And Jim, we also have a small gift for you to pick up on your way out too, that Tammy put together. So
A pen.
Thanks, Jim.
Awesome. So I'm going to take 6 months worth of work and try and get it into a 5 to 6 minute summary. And then at the end, have a time for Q&A in any direction that any of you would like to go, either with myself or with Mel or with some of the committee members, all of the committee members that are here. So let's do that. So first, our charge coming out of your authorization was to balance the enrollment of the 6 elementary schools, period. So the committee was responsible to stay inside the lines of balancing elementary school boundaries based on the forecast of growth as best as we would know, and as we hired a separate independent company to do an assessment of what that growth might look like, just to confirm previous data and or to deny it. We looked at the growth areas in the entire Tumwater School District catchment areas to understand what the next few years might look like. And we looked at everything that you can imagine that was listed inside of our guiding values. So, guiding principles. So first, your handout that's in front of you. There's a lot there, but those things that are there for the record, I'll take you through the process overview. Our strategic goals and principles are there for you just to revisit. I know you've seen them before, but I wanted you to have them in front of you. The community forum comments that came from the 2 community forums, which mattered a lot to the committee. Our final recommendation, which is on the board, and it is also one of the 11 by 17s that is printed there, and that is the actual work product. Just exactly the way it came out of our 5th meeting. And then talk a little bit about the enrollment forecast and how we believe we've achieved what you charged us to do. And appreciate the opportunity to show you. So let's talk a little bit about that very first page that's right in front of you. It looks like this. It's a process summary overview. And for everyone that's in the room and for what's being filmed, it has the dates in 2018 where we got the process started. It has a number of dates in 19, which includes today. It includes, as we head into a first and second reading, and what would be an approved, if approved, preliminary proposal for the fall of 20, just for the record, just to say that again, yeah. Fall of 20. You'll see a boundary committee bullets that talks about numbers of and how it was comprised. You'll see the actual boundary committee meetings, the 5 of them, and the 2 community forum meetings. So for the record, this represents the process that the committee put in place. And Mel and I adjusted the dates based on weather, and when we couldn't adjust at all. So that's our process. Behind that, and for you, you'll see our guiding principles. I want to talk a moment about this, because absent that, if you've ever, and I know that you have worked on boundary revision processes before, you can go in 1,000 directions. If you don't have something to say, that spending an hour on the bus is worse than 10 minutes. If you don't have something that says natural boundaries should be considered. If you don't have something that says that we need to hear from everyone that lives inside of the Tumwater School District, entire district catchment area, and how our proposed changes do and don't affect them. Right? And to take into serious consideration all feedback, and as a committee, work inside of the world of tension. It's the best way I know how to put it. Because for every move that you make one direction, you didn't go in another. For every line that you draw that doesn't move 50, it might move 60. And so working within those guiding principles and with the charge that you gave us was the work of the committee that took 5 committee meetings. And for those of you that have done this before, then you know it takes about 3 meetings for disparate people, different backgrounds, different ethos, different cultures, different linear versus nonlinear thinkers, teams of people working together that process differently, to work together. It takes about 3. It's a humbling experience. Right? And then in that 4th meeting, a lot happens. And by the 5th meeting, the team just dialed it into what I'm going to show you tonight. And so that brings us here tonight. Also in your packet, you'll see the feedback that came from the community forums 1 and 2. I thought you might like to have that with you. All of it was considered. Almost all of it was used in one form or another. Representation. I don't want to say this. It's a really nice thing to say about the Tumwater community. I have the privilege of facilitating many of these processes. And I can tell you honestly that the caliber of people and the feedback that is delivered can be a war zone. It wasn't. It was thoughtful, considerate, well-spoken. Community members that came were disciplined, mannered, caring, angry, frustrated, but clear, concise, and respectful of the committee members who were not afraid to be present during those community forums, which in some cases is the case. I just wanted to say that just for everyone that sees this. That was a marked difference from most everywhere else that I've been. So, with that data in hand, you have the 11 by 17 because I'm sure you can't see what I'm about to show you. The 11 by 17 that you have in front of you, there are 2 of them for the audience, and I'll just show for just a second. The actual work product at the end of the day that came from the committee on its last committee meeting, which will be what I'll describe here in a moment. The actual committee in one of their meetings, that was, if you look carefully, you'll see it's about 5 tables of 3 to 5 people. Carefully chosen so that I had linear thinkers with nonlinear thinkers, processors with non-processors, people that are really quick to look at a map and data and draw a line, and others that are scared to death to draw that line, working side by side. And it is that in and out piece that they all learned from each other. So if you would look for a moment at the colored map, I will show you the primary changes that were made. So, you know that we had ample room inside of, let me just back up for a minute, take a look at that summary page of numbers, because I'm going to use that here really quick. You knew when you looked at this that we had room in Little Rock of about 135 seats. East Olympia was about 17 heavy. Peter G was about 31. We had room. Michael T, we were sitting at 97 heavy. You know, Black Lake, we were 99 ready for more. And Tumwater Hills, we had room for 81. So that was where we started. That's on the balance line of that sheet. So we knew that with Little Rock, we were going to need to pull from our neighbors. So we knew we would be pulling from somewhere inside of this area at the end of 5 meetings. The committee is recommending for your consideration this corner that came out of Black Lake that now comes down to Little Rock, and this corner here out of East Olympia coming to Little Rock. We went round and round here, I can't even tell you how many times. And some of the most vocal people, to their credit, that came to the community forums, to their credit, living in here, forced the committee to go back and rethink our decisions, or the direction at that time we were headed. And in the doing of that, we had 5 or 6 or 7 different boundary moves that finally moved down to 3. And in doing those 3, we found that it did not make sense to actually make any changes in that one corner, and it came directly from feedback, which was a powerful mechanism. This made a ton of sense from a transportation standpoint. Transportation, I know you're gonna say, what's that little hooky doodle that's up there in the corner? Transportation's description to us about what streets they can drive down and turn around on and what streets they cannot, where they have to go to turn around and come back, was another 10 students right here where they actually have to traffic that road in that way in order to serve that area anyway. So it became a little sliver, and it had to do with how transportation actually picks up and drops off kids. So that allowed us, if you take a look at just the Little Rock, we have a building capacity of 425, a current enrollment of about 290, leaves us with about 135 seats open. The proposed changes adds 101. The future enrollment forecast is 391, which leaves us with a balance of about 34-ish. Now, every time we draw the data, the numbers move a little. So drawing it again, this could be 40, it could be 29, it could be 36 or 32, but the goal was to get into a range where we could get some common, balance the 6 elementaries, some common numbers at the bottom. And if you review that list looking across at that very bottom, you'll see that we end up in the 30 to 40 seat range of capacity in each of the 6 schools. That was accomplished by the move I just showed you. A portion of this area from Black Lake that went up to Tumwater Hills. We didn't touch Peter G. Didn't need to touch Peter G. A guiding principle was don't move it if you don't have to. And while it's full, the growth projections didn't say that overnight this line was just going to come off the charts. The growth projections do say that Michael T's line will come off the charts. And so we'll close on next steps here in a moment. But we didn't have to move any of this area. We grabbed one large chunk here because some large developments that are being built right in here and taking those to Black Lake. And then knowing that out here in the preserve area, amongst other developments, just that one alone and the property that you've purchased for a future possible elementary school. That plus the development information, plus all the permitting information and everybody else's residence information, it took us 5 meetings to go from an infinite number of moves to 1, 2, 3, 4. To get you to where your elementary schools have a balance of about 30 to 40 seats with a single move. When you do this, it's hard to imagine that you're ever going to come to an answer, because if you read all of the public comments, nobody wants to move anything. Nobody wants, they didn't move to where they live to have their kids go to a school that they didn't choose. And if they chose that school, you can imagine the conversations in the early stages where I had to remind everyone, including at the community forums, that all schools inside of Tumwater are excellent schools, and that the person you might be talking about might be standing right next to you in the school that you might say something you shouldn't say. And what happens in that process, and I watched, and I had the privilege of watching a team of the caring piece. There's nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer, just right out of the gate. And a volunteer that stays in it when it's tense. How do you look up at your neighbor and say, I'm going to move your cheese? And say that in a way where you know that you've done everything you can to honor those principles, and on behalf of the district and all of our children, that move is the best one with the least pain possible. That committee did that. That summary that you see there is the result of that work. And it would be, it's hard if you've never done it before, it's hard to know how do you talk and work on something that is going to actually affect a lot of people that you know. This committee did that. What you see in front of you is the result of those 5 work sessions, the 2 community forums. First one was attended, which one was attended lighter and heavier? I can't remember. Is it the second one that came in heavier? Yeah. So for the record and for the room, we set this up in a way where the first community forum wasn't a meeting where we were going to propose an answer or a direction. It was simply to say, the rumor's true. There is a boundary revision process going on. We haven't come up with an idea yet. We don't even have a direction yet. But we'd like to hear your voice in a feedback forum on preferably recommendations that we should consider, like knowing that there's a particular street in here on a map that shows that it goes all the way through, but in fact it doesn't. It actually dead ends, and then there's a little burp right at the end, and there's 3 houses there. It's important to know that when you're talking about who you're going to move. So feedback on that. Concerns around program, quality of education, concerns about time on a bus. It's one of our values to minimize, but there's a lot of geography here, and it doesn't take long to get a lot of time on a bus. So we worked hard at that. But the feedback, and for the record, and so that everyone knows, every single thing that was said, every single comment that was made, we talked about, and we included in our discussions. So what does that look like? One boundary meeting. So the process is it's about an hour and a half, and if they hang out a little longer, about 2 hours. First 10 or 15 minutes is sort of to set the stage for what we're going to work on that night, and it's a map night, big maps, tracing paper, lots of pens and notes. Set a charge on what we need to do, break into about 5 different teams, small groups, and have small groups work independently from each other to try and balance the enrollment in the elementary schools. And at the end of about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, make them, in each small group, come back out to the whole group and report out to the entire team. What they learned, what didn't work, what did work, where they got stuck. This is too hard, I can't do it. I have a great idea, what do you think? So that the learnings that happen in each small group, where not everyone is comfortable speaking in a large group, could be the benefit of the entire room's learnings when we found that 1 team out of 5 had a cool idea. That in the next meeting became the common idea for all 5, and then we started again. And so you start wide, and you work your way down to where you get down to the very final night where it's time for someone like me with a team like them to say, all those in favor of that line right there, raise your hand. We did that for every move that's on this map that's being sent to you for consideration with a unanimous approval. No dissenting votes. We stayed there, and it wasn't difficult to get there. In the last few minutes of that last night, when Mel's saying, Duke, I don't know if we're going to make it. Hope we do, but I don't know if we're going to make it. I said, trust the committee. They're almost there. You can just feel it when you see it coming. And they did, and this is what that looks like. And we're proud of the work and appreciate your opportunity to consider it. Just before I open it up for Q&A, because part of your Q&A, in my opinion, in our opinion, should address this. People want to go to school here. You're not a declining district. They continue to move here and have children that they look forward to having their kids go to school here. And you're growing, which means this has to happen again. Now, we don't know if that's 3 years out, 5 years out, 7 years out. Don't know what that time frame is. But if that report that's in the left side of your binder is true, even close forecast of enrollment growth over time, then somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years, whether it be something that has to happen in one of the densest parts of your district or somewhere out here where you have land where the preserve is now, there's another school that comes into the world. And when that happens, it's time to reboundary the elementaries again. So just for the record, for the room, and for you, this is just step 1. A recommendation from us to you. There's an immediate next step of, awesome, Jim, what about the middle schools and high schools? What happened? We weren't charged with the effort to look at that in this direction. Our recommendation is that you consider doing so that, and do it on the heels of looking at the data we have, which is relevant and current, to begin looking for, are there any fatal flaws in the middle school and high school? And then lastly, if that is of interest to you, my recommendation to you would be to utilize as many of the current committee members and or facilitator to continue a process that it could be someone that is just as bad as me, student. But there is a rhythm of work. It takes 3 meetings just to learn how to read data, read maps, and be able to work together. And imagine if we could condense that into something much shorter and be able to capitalize on the bases in place. It's time now to look the rest of the way and have conversations that would include but not be limited to, how are we doing with equitable programs in those schools? What's going to happen as we look at these next 3 years of growth that's happening here? How does that affect the Peter G. world? What we know is that it will. We just don't know how bad and when. So that lies out ahead of us. So there are a number of those pieces that I wanted to make part of our recommendation tonight for next steps, for your consideration as you think about that going forward. But that's what we looked like. It was awesome fun. I'm going to take just a couple last minutes and open it up. So for those of you here that were part of the community forums, and for those of you that are watching that attended those forums, thank you for that. It was priceless. I know there were times that were difficult, but tension is where we find answers. And when people stay at the table, cool things happen. And it was brilliant to watch the committee members work with frustrations that had pearls of information inside them. That's one. To staff, so Lori and Mel and I were kind of that top little piece. Saw John once in a while, saw some other staff once in a while, and it could not have been done or communicated as well without this team. But there's another player inside of this, which is the transportation department. Jeff. Not Jace.
Jeff
I called him Jace for months, and I never got corrected. It's okay, I think that's an issue for me. Transportation actually makes the final call when we get down to those final steps, because we're not buying new buses. So it has to work with the capital that you have. So when we finally get to where we have a wish list and 9 out of 10 items go away because you just flat can't get there. Priceless information. They were with us throughout the entire process. And I can't tell you how many times they were called for at the working table. So I wanted to make that note. And then in my own words, so I have nothing but the best of things to say about those members of the committee that worked for you and for our kids. Wonderful people with powerful hearts that are really smart. And it's something to get smart people that come with desire. And desire doesn't always bring talent, right? You always hope it does, but it doesn't always. And talent doesn't always bring desire, someone that's going to stay with it long enough to get to an answer. But if you care enough and you're smart enough and you learn the humility of trusting your fellow committee members' words, it is the coolest thing to see when that gels. Because all of a sudden, Mel and Lori and I aren't needed anymore. Other than make sure you get the maps redone, Jim. That moment, there was a moment in those 5 meetings where I looked up at Mel and I said, we're there. Watch them. Here they go. So I just wanted to say thank you for those of you that were on the committee. Stand up for a moment. Not all of you. Come on. Yes. So it was a privilege to serve, and thank you for the opportunity to present. The floor is yours for Q&A of myself or the team or whatever you would like.
Does the board got any questions, concerns?
Great job.
Okay, Melissa.
I had lots of people Facebook messaging me or emailing me, and I said, email Mel, there is a committee working on this. And I never heard from them again because you guys were listening to them. And so I really appreciate the committee members who took, they weren't able to go to these meetings and they had little ones at home. They really felt heard, and I'm glad that there was that space there, because they're coming out of a place of fear, right? And I was glad that there was that space for them to be heard. Like I said, I didn't hear back from them. When I said they're coming with a recommendation, it's don't I'm not gonna be able to help you at this point. You need to talk with them, they're the ones with all the information, and I just really appreciate that you honored that process and that they felt heard. So thank you for leading that, thank you committee members for making that happen.
Okay, other board comments? If not, Jim, we thank you very much. John, you got anything you want? I guess I was wondering, the people in the audience got questions? If you do, we got cards somewhere, they could write. Does anybody want a card to write a question? Because this is not a public hearing, it's a, so anyway, if anyone out there's got a burning question, get a card, write it down, give it to John, and it will be dealt with. Okay, John?
I'm gonna draw you back to this one pager Jim prepared because it gives you what's happening next as well. So you'll see that it shows, tonight's, briefing, and then on May 9th, we'll bring you a first reading, for a formal, adjustment of boundaries. And the first reading will give the public another chance to come and weigh in, and we anticipate they definitely will, given the history of these kinds of processes. The reason that's delayed until May 9th is currently what we're working on internally is, okay, the committee has done their work, but there are also some other questions regarding, okay, for those families that have to change, do we consider any grandfather? If so, what's that look like? How long does that last? When do we sunset? That kind of thing. So those questions are for staff now to add to the mix of recommendations that we bring to you. So we need a little time to pull that together, and that's why you won't see a recommendation until early May. And then on June 13th, we'll fold in any final input and bring to you a final recommendation, again, for implementation in fall of 2020, not 2019. And the reason for a one-year delay is that's not only customary with these kinds of changes, mainly for a significant number of logistical planning tasks that this triggers. Student data,
Staffing.
transportation, staffing, program relocation, that's just a few. But you heard the recommendation tonight that the district also move forward with a middle and high school corresponding review. And so I'm gonna echo Jim's recommendation that in school year 1920, that be considered with as many of the same committee members that might be willing to help us move that initiative forward. The other thing is in recent weeks, the board is receiving questions regarding our transfer patterns, our policies, our procedures. Perhaps if the district has interest in looking at all of that, that could be folded into the same kind of review. So, and with that in mind, I'm also gonna remind the board that Mel Murray has shared with us in terms of our long-range facilities planning process that 7th elementary school Jim has alluded to. It's really not an if, it's when we're going to need, as a school district, a 7th elementary school, which will trigger a redo of this kind of project. And frankly, will sooner than that have this district and this board considering another bond issue to help construct another elementary school and other facility improvements. So a lot on the horizon, and this work, along with a lot of Mel's work, lays the groundwork for, I think, some important projects moving forward. Thank you both.
Okay,
Thank you.